The Void is a recent horror film co-written and co-directed by Jeremy Gillespie and Steven Kostanski. And it's basically about a local cop who lives in Nowhere City, and he sees a guy with blood all over him crawl out of the woods, so he takes him to the local hospital to get treatment. And soon after, everybody in the hospital realizes that they are completely surrounded by these hooded figures that resemble some sort of cult. While at the same time, somebody in the hospital is transforming into this disturbing alien monster type creature. Now, all those who are already familiar with this movie already know that this film is supposed to be this throwback to 80s body horror. And when I say 80s body horror, I mean films like John Carpenter's The Thing and Hellraiser. So I was extremely pumped to see this movie because I've been a longtime fan of The Thing. What John Carpenter was able to do with that film using only prosthetics and practical effects blew me away and really disturbed me when I was younger, and honestly, even till now. So was this film as great as I hoped for it to be? Well, it's pretty decent. I didn't love it as much as I wanted to, but it's a decent film. First, let's talk about what I enjoyed about the film. Obviously, the first one being the prosthetics and the practical effects. You can really honestly tell how much time and effort they put into these monsters and alien type creatures. I'm fairly certain that at least 70% of the budget just went to doing the prosthetic effects. It was really interesting and enjoyable to watch this movie and just to see all the different kinds of creatures that they were able to conjure up. The acting was pretty decent for the most part, especially for actors that I've never even heard of or seen before. There are times though where you're just sitting there observing some of their acting and you're just kind of like, I don't know if you really convinced me there. But for the most part, I thought their performances were decent enough. Where the film really starts to falter is with the story and characters. Now honestly, the characters really weren't that bad. I actually think that they were established fairly decently. But the problem is that I really wanted more out of them. I feel like they weren't fleshed out enough throughout the story. And that kind of sucks because when one of them is in peril and they're about to die, you don't really care about them dying. You just kind of want to see them die because you want to be entertained by the monsters eating them alive. I don't know, just me personally, I would rather see a horror movie where I actually care about these characters and I actually want them to get away from the evil. But in this movie, it was kind of vice versa. I actually wanted the evil to get to the characters because I didn't really care for the characters and I was just sitting there wanting to be entertained. And as for the story goes, I mean, I don't know, I just found it to be really unbelievable and I felt like I had to suspend disbelief from my brain. It just doesn't give you enough logical clarity to actually buy what's happening. And I'm usually a huge fan of ambiguity. I like it when films don't spoon-feed you everything. But this film in particular just has an incredibly batshit crazy premise that in order to get the audience sucked into their film, they're gonna have to give us a little bit more information, whether it's visually or through dialogue or whatever. There's this one scene in particular where the villain character is giving us this long monologue, and it's the film attempting to explain exactly what is happening. But even after his monologue is done and the film is done explaining itself, you're kind of still sitting there like, I still don't really get it, but okay. And unfortunately, this resulted in me feeling like I was watching a more like B-grade horror film. I mean, if this is what you're expecting, if you're expecting just a silly, prosthetic-filled, gore-filled, fun, body horror, B-grade movie, then sure, you probably love this movie. But I was looking for something slightly more substantive and something that was more seriously thought about in terms of character and story. I guess you could say it just comes down to your expectation of the film, but I just personally feel like there was a lot of potential in this and they could have done a lot more with its story and characters, which would have made for a better film in my opinion. But overall, I really did enjoy the film. I could tell that a lot of time and effort was put into those practical effects. I thought a whole bunch of no-name actors gave pretty good performances. And even though it suffered from uneventful characters and a very loose story, there was still not a single moment in this film where I found myself bored. So with all of those aspects put into consideration, I'm going to give The Void a B-. And one thing that I forgot to add is that there is a really odd use of CGI in this film. It's not used a lot, it's only used in the very end, but it's kind of weird. The whole attraction behind this film is, the whole prosthetic and practical effects. Come see this movie because we're not using CGI, it's all practical. But, in the end, it uses this really shitty use of CGI. It's kind of like, oh, well, alright, I guess that's cool. But anyway, now I want to hear your thoughts on The Void. Have you guys seen it yet? I know it was in and out of theaters, so maybe most of you haven't got to see it yet, but it should be out on Blu-ray now, so go get it, go see it, and tell me what you guys think about it. And as always, thank you so much for checking out my thoughts on The Void. If you really like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And make sure to subscribe to the Misfit Pawn channel so you can be updated on more film-related content.